Alright, so, Division 2 Endgame. We finally got a slice of the Endgame Black Tusk faction, and we're able to play through an invaded mission, and honestly, I loved it. There is a lot to unpack here, but overall, I have a lot of positive things to say about the Endgame thus far. There is one core factor that concerns me, which I'll address at the end, but largely speaking, I think the Division has built the framework to become one of the best looter shooters on the entire market, after the unbelievable amount of bugs have been fixed, of course. The structure of Endgame can be boiled down to a content revamp. After reaching max level, the map is invaded by a new and unique faction called the Black Tusk. The Black Tusk will rotate through missions, control points, and various areas of the open world, providing a new version of pre-existing missions. Right off the bat, I like this concept. In the original Division game, after leveling from 1 to 30, there was absolutely no reason to visit most of the missions ever again. Even after extensive patches and large amounts of new content, half the map is, to this day, completely dead and useless. Division 2, on the other hand, has created a system that allows them to rotate through all of the existing content, and through various augmentations, create a fresh take on what we have already played, which is fantastic. The Black Tusk faction also has some careful considerations. I will be referencing Anthem a lot here because it's a contemporary comparison of a looter game that serves as the perfect example of some of the worst and laziest difficulty augmentation I've ever seen. In Anthem, difficulty is simply a function of enemy health and damage. That's it. And Division 2 is not immune to this, namely when operating in a group of any size greater than 2, it completely destroys the experience and turns the enemies into insane bullet sponges, but they've done some stuff to fix it. Division 2 is not just enemy health and damage numbers for difficulty scaling. Much more goes into it. In Anthem, you fight the same enemies through the entire leveling process and also in Endgame, whereas once the Endgame loop is reached, they have up to 30 times as much health and damage. In Division 2, you fight various factions, yes, up until Endgame, and then the Black Tusk emerges, which is wildly different, so right off the bat, there is a divergence to keep things interesting. When I discussed my concerns for Anthem, I speculated on alternative methods that could increase difficulty other than just scaling health and damage. Examples I gave were things like enemy spawn points, EMP jammers, new tactics, new abilities, and more. Well, the Black Tusk faction utilizes that type of technique to create endgame content, which has a lot going on, is difficult, but is not just a lazy buff that simply jacks up enemy NPC stats. The Black Tusk enemies in missions sometimes slide in from above on ropes, are airlifted in, or burst through the doors to the sides like normal. There are new enemy archetypes as well. Armored dogs with turrets on their backs, and they're not really dogs, but whatever. Mobile turret installations, and drones with massive weapons attached to them that hover around and shoot. A change can be seen where in the early game, enemies send over remote-controlled demo cars to explode on your position if you don't push them or get them out of cover or are idle too long. The Black Tusk operators use exploding drones, smaller, sometimes faster, and harder to hit. They increase the difficulty with a fresh take while not simply relying on health and damage. When killing one of the robotic dogs, an EMP pulse fires. The EMP can disable all electronics, not just your own. It can knock drones out of the air or shut down other objects in the vicinity, even the enemy ones. In some rooms, there are skill jammers, increasing difficulty by removing skills until the team destroys the objectives. There are in fact many different ways the Black Tusk modify difficulty, and a great deal of them are tactical, innovative, and unique, rather than simple, lazy, and annoying. There are still some problems with the bullet sponge effect, especially in a group of anything larger than 2, and the Black Tusk faction characteristics sometimes exacerbate this because certain enemies have a huge amount of armor, though in a lot of cases the armor can be targeted piece by piece and then broken, so if a coordinated squad bursts down the plating on a machine gunner's left arm, for instance, they can then kill him while ignoring the rest of the armor plating, and it helps reward tactical players rather than just shooting the nearest enemy mindlessly. So what is the point of these activities, since they are done quite well it seems? Well, the point is the loot. And now, with a larger look at how endgame gear will be balanced and a good grasp of building, I can happily say that the loot is fantastic. There will obviously be further balancing over time in regards to specific values or numbers, but the loot quantity, quality, and potential is through the roof. Gear mods are completely different. Gear now rolls with a random number of slots, with random affinities, offensive, defensive, or utility. Gear mods themselves roll with 3 different stats, and on top of that, you have brand sets with 3 bonuses based on how many pieces are equipped, and then talents themselves, which are, again, quite strong. Talents range from reload speed, cooldown reduction, or RPM increases even, to complex activations like killing a target that has a current functioning status effect on them, which then gives your entire group critical hit chance for a duration. And the way to activate the more specialized talents that have very strong damage or skill enhancing effects, you have to balance what talent types you already have on your other gear pieces to unlock whatever that requirement is. In the end, I will be able to make dozens of videos about this, but for now I'll summarize and say the loot, the building, the customization, and the potential is through the roof. Talents do in fact stack, and they are also not slot specific, so in the end, the sheer quantity of potential options with which to customize your character is very admirable. With that said, because of this gear and build diversity, balancing is likely going to be a roller coaster, so be prepared for some crazy things to emerge and then get nerfed, as is always the cycle in these types of games. Now on to my one big concern: normalization. It's been said quite a few times that normalization is only meant to create a semi-level baseline for PvP in the Dark Zone or in Skirmish and other playlist PvP modes. I'm not so sure that's the case right now. The current system seems to not just compress the gear gap, but remove it entirely. Certain weapon and gear active talents may come into play, but it's not the same creature anymore, where your ability to craft a build and combine the proper stats leads to a real, tangible advantage. Players with literally anything equipped can go up against players that have far superior gear, level, stat allocation, everything really, and have no visible disadvantage. There is indeed a slice of content called the Occupied Dark Zone available where normalization is disabled, but with how aggressive the normalization has turned out to be, if that really is the only zone or PvP activity in which having all golds with great rolls versus all purples with crap rolls would even matter, that will be really, really shitty. There are two sides to crafting a stronger build, two reasons to do it. The first is to mow down NPCs and shred missions or alternative content. The second is to fight other players and see whose build and skill level are superior. The normalization in its current aggressive form has diminished the PvP value of grinding for gear severely. The problem only becomes visible, however, when exploring the massive range of endgame stat rolls and combinations, whereas in early game, the normalization feels pretty much fine. If you only intend to play the Division for PvE missions, you will have a lot to bite into with Division 2. But if you enjoy PvP, but also the feeling of crafting a loadout that matters in PvP, you're going to have one zone that feels meaningful, and that's the Occupied Dark Zone. But that Dark Zone rotates, so you may not even be able to play your carefully crafted build to maximum effect within the Dark Zone that you prefer, or to which it is best suited most of the time. Don't forget, the 3 Dark Zones are built to have different layouts, one conducive to sniping, one close quarters, and one mid-range. If you want to make a sniper build, it will be very hard to use it as often in the Southern Dark Zone. So if that's not the occupied zone at the time, you're shit out of luck. And you can indeed participate in the normalized PvP within other Dark Zones and modes, but removing a large amount of the PvP incentive to grind really good gear is not a positive in my eyes. It's an age-old debate. Is the Division supposed to prioritize PvP or PvE? The game was marketed around the Dark Zone being its core feature and its core selling point, an area where PvP was constantly enabled and an emphasis placed on trust no one, you can always be attacked. So to me, it's pretty ignorant to think that PvP is not a massive focus. Is it the largest focus? Maybe not. You can have about equal priorities, I guess, but the idea that PvP is some secondary afterthought like a lot of people pretend, and the primary purpose is PvE, that is a demonstrably false and idiotic point of view. Some normalization is totally fine. I respect the concept, in fact, but normalization too high diminishes one of the core motivational factors behind grinding through the endgame content in order to acquire the good gear rolls. It does not destroy the framework, which so far is looking quite good, but it's certainly a downside. Overall, I loved what I played of the endgame content. Most of my time was spent in a duo because the party size scaling is disgustingly bad. Solo and duo feels great. 3 and 4 mans fall apart completely and make the game a total chore as more and more enemies spawn that take unbelievable amounts of damage to kill, but that type of issue can be fixed. The basic endgame format with invaded missions, new enemy tactics, abilities, and archetypes feels fantastic. The gear looks to be, as expected, a supreme highlight. Unique combinations of talents and stat rolls will make it possible for players to innovate in a way that was not really an option in the original game. But with PvP balancing being clamped down by normalization, it will hinder the enjoyment for a large section of the player base. To be clear, the current time to kill is very good on console. It can probably prove problematic a bit on PC, I have heard, but I am not advocating for a drastic change to that metric, only a reduction in the standardization across the board of PvP balancing. Endgame looks really good, with a few potential downsides if not balanced properly, and the overarching concern above all of this is a horrendous technical condition for the game right now. Audio bugs, disconnects, getting stuck in objects, teleporting NPCs, you name it. But purely examining endgame mechanics, the development team has carefully crafted something here that has a ton of potential. That's about it though, not much more to say. I'll continue covering the game as new information is made available, but in the interim, I'll be going back to broad strokes industry coverage like I've been doing for quite a while now. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. We have esports merch, various communities, Discord server, Facebook group, and gaming forums, our own gaming forums that is. But that's enough for today. I'll cut it there and I'll stop rambling. As always, thank you for watching, and have a nice night.